Greetings from Rome. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. And then also this is a hybrid seminar, so we have some in-person participants here, very welcome. And then also that we have quite a few registered participants online, and thank you so much for coming to this seminar. Just for the housekeeping announcement that this seminar will be recorded, and then this will be made available after the seminar for those people who wanted to join the seminar. And then this will be, the consents have been received from the presenters. So thank you very much, everybody.
Hello, it's my testing. Hello, are you?
Okay, and then the program is that the first that we have an opening session, and then we will have a quite few great lineup of the presentations. Hopefully that you will enjoy all the presentations. And then the aim of this presentation, this seminar, is to understand what kind of AI applications existing currently in the world in terms of the topics of food safety as well as food safety management, meaning that what regulators or competent authorities may be able to use AI for food safety management. So the focus is slightly different from the scientific application, technical application in the detailed food safety issues, but then rather overarching management issues. And then we will have a case studies later part of the sessions. We will welcome some virtual presenters, so that would be really a nice case study. So from 3 countries, one is from UK and Italy, and then US. So with that, I will give the floor to the Senior Food Safety Officer, Dr. Marcus Lipp, to open the seminar. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Masami, and yeah, also a warm welcome from my end to everybody online and all of you here. So AI and food safety, 2 interesting topics, at least to me personally, and that might be occupational hazard as I'm called Senior Food Safety Officer, so hopefully food safety is of interest to me. But AI is certainly a very topical theme of our days anyway. We will not make too many efforts in this presentation to separate the machine learning versus AI versus other subgenres, because normally in the media that's pretty mixed anyway, and I think it's too theoretical to make a difference. But I would like to highlight a few thoughts from us or from myself. So AI currently is of course at the peak or near the peak of its hype curve. So everybody talks about AI. Everybody has an opinion about AI. The dreams are really high. The speculations are really wild. And the belief on what these systems are able to do and help us in the future is pretty extensive, I shall say. Now, we are not necessarily thinking always that all these speculations are truth, and that's probably, you agree with that, because there are too many commercial interests, too many other hopes in that regard. But it causes a lot of confusion, and it causes a lot of fear and concerns. Like, will the machine rule us all? Will we have some sort of means and methods to hold back? And those are at the core very, very pertinent questions. So one of the, I have to preface this, what I'm saying is at the current moment, of course, you all know that AI is developing extremely fast these days. And so we can then, of course, have to wait and see what happens. There are the first AI systems from Anthropic that have a more agent function that can type into fields on web browsers and elsewhere. So it's going very, very fast. But at its core, one thing is very early in its infancy. We cannot interrogate AI at the moment. So if AI is used as a decision-making tool, like it's often announced to do, we cannot interrogate AI at the moment. We cannot interrogate the large language model or the other neural networks to ask them, how did you come up with that conclusion? This is possible with humans. right? You can put humans on a witness stand and say, please explain to me, show me the data, make the calculation for me that led you to whatever conclusion you came to. But that's not yet possible in the same form or in the same depth for AI. That has some intrinsic problems. So it's more a black box mechanism in that regard. And that is, of course, uncomfortable and brings its own risks. But then the outcomes can be utterly helpful. Whoever has played around with ChatGPT, Notebook LM, Claude, or any of the other later generation models knows that the language capabilities to at least produce standard language, it's never going to win a Pulitzer Prize at the moment. But for standard corporate language, it's utterly helpful and does it so effortlessly. It's just marvelous, right? So that's most delightful, most wonderful. But as we cannot interrogate it, we have to read what it does, and then sooner or later we will find, depending on the model used, that it hallucinates. It just makes up things in very convincing manner and just equally as eloquent as the real stuff. It makes up references if you want to, and so that's still one of the problems with AI. Now, when we think about AI in decision-making processes, like in food safety, for regulatory purposes, for data analysis, this becomes a little trickier because then we cannot really interrogate the system and say, why did you make this decision that says this or that is not safe or whatever it is? Bless you. And so that is a little more interesting. And so I'm very, very interested about the presentations today. So we will hear from FAO internally. We will hear from, as Masami said, from the Netherlands, the UK, and the US with case studies, or representatives from the Netherlands, the UK, and the US with case studies on how this is being done. And I think it will be really interesting to follow along because, well, as FAO, we are not a regulatory authority, so we don't make regulatory decisions. But our members do, members are countries. And so them sharing their experience and helping us learning and understand where we are in this process and how far we can go and where their concerns are will be very critical to us and very instrumental and helpful. We much appreciate all the inputs that we got from or will get from our presenters and their flexibility to either join us here in person or later online as well at a very inopportune time, I may add, for our colleagues from the United States. But it's much appreciated. And with that said, I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention and turn it over back to Masami. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus. So the first speaker today is our in-house AI expert. Eric, you have the floor. I will share the screen. Here it is, and then here's the window.
Thank you so much, Masami and Marcus, for setting the opening stage. So today I will talk a little bit about innovations and AI at FAO. So the first 5 slides are on what we do as the Office of Innovation. I work for the FAO Office of Innovation. We started about 2 years ago. And from there, I will dive more deeper into AI. So we very much operate, certainly as the Office of Innovation, under the FAO Science and Innovation Strategy. And we also have a FAO Chief Scientist, and that was the whole movement where FAO start giving much more priority to science, technology, and innovation. You see the gap that is on the left part of the slide, and you can kind of see there's an urge to close this gap. And I believe that this was one of the main reasons why the Office of Innovation was instantiated. And the next slide, I will tell you more about the global innovation model that we are after. The first one is the activity on what we short as ATIO, which stands for Agri-Food Systems, Technologies and Innovations Outlook. On the right upper corner, you can see it. So we're planning to, the picture you see on the right side is the first release of the plan, so to say. You can download that publication. And then we will publish the publication on Atio. And this will be about the status of the sciences, technologies, and innovation. Behind there will be a knowledge base. Here we call it the open access data source. We also refer to it sometimes like the Atio knowledge base. And there we will have sciences, technologies, and innovations in the stages of pre-emergent, emergent, and mature status. Then the next one is foresight. This is certainly part also of our global innovation model. I would say foresight is very much scenario-based, forward-looking. So it's different than outlook. Outlook is really evidence-based, up to 5 years, 4 years. Foresight can go even up to 50 years. But I believe in the publication you see here on the right side, you can download it as well. We did that together with CIRAD. It goes, I believe, up to 30 years. And there is much more to say, but we really believe that foresight can help change policies because you know what's coming. Of course, it's not evidence-based, but we would like to depict the scenarios and have a discussion around it and to trigger the discussion. Digital agriculture. I can see that digital agriculture is at the moment in the Office of Innovation, and I can see AI coming up there everywhere. And I'm not going through all of this, it's more for your reference, but one to pick out is on digital advisory services. So we're talking at the moment with a couple of groups to really think through how can we use large language models to advise farmers and other actors in the agri-food systems with actual information which is relevant day by day. And of course, we need to package them in all the various languages and contextualize them. There's a lot of work to do. And later on, I come back also on some thoughts on that. Then behavioral science. This is also a very good stream of work within the Office of Innovation. Really think through, and I believe behavioral science comes back often also in the world of food safety. So I'm not a food safety expert, so I won't go there too much, but I do know that, that your discipline is very much into this as well. And what my colleagues always try to explain that we shouldn't start with the mindset, we should start with the context, and I'll refer to my colleagues to explain better why, but here you have the initial models. We have a couple of global innovation hubs. At the moment, we have them in Morocco and Ethiopia, and we're planning to have a couple of more of them. And here we would like to scale up much more the innovation. And certainly this is, at the moment, I believe, fairly digital agriculture centric. But we will also start working there with open innovation models. And I believe the whole transition from closed innovation, closed in-house innovation models to open innovation model is a very interesting route which we are deploying there. From here, we step into AI. And you see at the bottom, we were amongst the first signatories of the Rome call for AI ethics. And this was an important step just before the pandemic. And it was really good for us to set the mind, to do the mind setting. So it defines, you can find it on the website. It defines those 3 impact areas, ethics, education, and rights. And for instance, Marcus spoke about how can we interrogate AI, and you can see this is the first principle on transparency. And all the others are part of, I believe, equally important. And I know that I saw some presentations already which will be given today. They will come back also further today. We translated that within FAO into the 5 internal principles for responsible AI. And you see transparency at the bottom. And I believe at the top, principle number 1 is maybe for a reason there, I don't remember, but the whole idea that we should not create a new digital divide. We should not create a new an AI divide. So everything we do should be inclusive and so forth. So these principles are part of are the basis for all of our AI work. So currently I have a couple of slides what is FAO doing at the moment. So we have an internal community of practice, and I believe it's the biggest community of practice in FAO. And this, I believe, reflects also kind of what the importance that FAO is giving to AI at the moment. We have a couple of AI champions there, and they are the bridge between the community of practice within FAO and in the AI coordination team. So that's the second box there. Maybe the wording is even slightly wrong here. We have already an AI coordination team. It's up and running, and the four strategic divisions are part of that. So we are developing the AI governance models. And if you see the yellow boxes they have in common that they talk about self-governance. And this is a concept which you can look up at the World Economical Forum website. They have a whole article on that often you see that organizations do start with self-governance, but as FAO, we also need to work on governance for our stakeholders out there. And at the bottom, you see, for instance, that the UN has self-governance work, and then on the left, the UN advisory bodies published the global governance guidance, and it's called AI for Humanity. This came out, I believe, a couple of months ago, maybe not even 2 months ago. So it's actually, and it's a good read. I can recommend reading it. Then we are using, we are piloting with Copilot, which is, you could say, is a kind of ChatGPT for personal work. So it's really using a large language model in your day-to-day work as FAO personal. And we have the FAO Data Lab, and this is you can also find them on the website. They are within the statistics division. This is a list. I'm not going through this. On the bottom, you see the list. It's published for some reason at the ITU website. It's not complete, but this is what's there. So you can see that there are a lot of applications within FAO which do use AI, but there are more as well. Then this is already my last slide, so I think I'm quite good on time. So I would like to go through it just a little bit. So normally we don't present drawing tables to the public, so to say, but this time we felt like doing it because AI is moving very fast, and we would like to call upon all of us to think along with us, where do we need to take this? And I believe that 30% we will probably we will start managing to start doing this within a year or something. And maybe another 30% we will never do at all. But we need to have a very good discussion also with with the discipline of food safety and so forth. Where do we set our priorities? So the first box, you see a kind of the process that we envisage at the moment to start thinking through what does it mean AI for agri-food systems or AI for food safety to go to your discipline. So we think that we need to have a process where we discover use cases, where we filter them, we catalyze them, and then we scale them. But how do we scale and how do we make sure that this is inclusive? We are thinking of a sandbox. So this is at the moment more internally, where if somebody has a wild ID within FAO, we can bring it to the sandbox and we can try to do an experiment and see whether this is a valid ID. And maybe we can even operationalize sandbox as a public service. The dialogue is part of where I started this slide with. We really need to have a dialogue with various disciplines, and we may even organize a meeting around this. We are not sure yet, but we do think we need to have a specific dialogue on AI for agri-food systems. I mentioned here partnerships with big tech. This is not only the classical big tech companies as you know them, it's also the digital agriculture players out there. And we need to have them on the table as well. We're thinking of a PhD program for AI. So we wouldn't do this by ourselves. We would do this with universities. We would like to gear them towards FAO strategic objectives, because there's a lot of research going on, and we would like to inspire them with our sustainable development goals and those who are relevant for FAO. Challenges, this is certainly close to our heart from the Office of Innovation, and I find very interesting the platform Zindi, which is all about challenges, jobs, and challenges, jobs, and what was the other one? Education. And this is a model which, on those 3 lines, I think this is a very good way of, at least, which could be a good stream of work for FAO. Foundation models, this goes back to the discussion which I mentioned at Digital Agriculture, using large language models for digital advisory services. And what does it mean to have a foundation model for agri-food systems? What does it mean to have a foundation model for FAO foods, for food safety? And how do we go about it? Will they be commercial closed source models, or will they be in the open space? And there's a new concept coming up which we call data commons. It's not very clear yet, as well as the definition of what does it mean, a foundation model for food safety. But this is where we need to talk about more. Atio bot would be the chatbot on Atio, the slide which I mentioned before. We could have an AI book. We could produce policy briefs, maybe 2 a year. Then there's ongoing work on biological classification. So how do we identify fishery species, animal breeds, and so forth? And I think in the realm of food safety, this is important as well. There's also ongoing work on crop type mapping and yield forecast. And yesterday I was challenged and somebody said, but why don't you work on animal disease prediction? And I thought it was a great one, so maybe we'll add it. So I think I'm going to the end. Please join us in our thinking and in our work, and have a good day for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I would like to open the floor. I am looking at the chat box for the questions, and then also the floor here. Do you have any questions to Eric? Yes, please, Adriano.
Yes, I have a question about the PhD program. I'm very curious how we're organized with the PhD program, because we could be interested.
So this is certainly on the drawing table. We had a quick check-in with about 5 universities. They liked the idea, and the modalities would be that that universities would organize the PhD program by themselves. So they would be primarily responsible, and then FAO would dedicate some time to also guide the whole PhD process. So that's one way. And then we would, for instance, the topics, we would love to gear them to topics which are relevant for FAO. And also there, we would like to be inclusive. So we need to think through how to also engage with universities in low and middle income countries, so that they also will be part of this. Over.
Any other questions from the floor? I have one question from the chat. At which extent current work on innovations and AI on food safety at FAO are developed in cooperation with other partner agencies? So probably this is for you, Marcus, or for you, Eric, the 2 of you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, of course, we are not the only ones who are thinking about AI. Everybody thinks about AI, how that can be used, how that can be used for predictive capabilities, whatever the topic of the organization is, how that can be used for better data mining, which is another big topic where the hopes are big that let's say, new insights would be generated by AI when unleashed on data pools or data lakes or structured, unstructured data of any shape of form. Hence, again, my remarks earlier with can we interrogate, can we actually ask the system what it means? Because fundamentally, at the current moment, all these models would only determine correlations, not causations. And so then there needs to be a lot of human intelligence to make sure that this is not just a spurious correlation, i.e., if your data pool is large enough, you will find a correlation with statistical certainty, although there's not necessarily a meaning underneath. So we have to just be very careful. And the demands on all of us in terms of data literacy, in terms of AI literacy, information literacy, or whatever you want to call it, will just increase exponentially with the capabilities of these models and at a very fast pace. We will be faced by media coming up with, oh, we unleashed the latest AI, and here is something that whatever agency has not regarded yet, or FAO or WHO or every other international agency, and we will need to be ready to respond to that. It's almost inevitable that this will come and that we need to do something. Having said that, at the current state, it will only be a correlation only, which at the current amount of data we will have, or we are having, is inevitable to be discovered. So good luck to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Eric, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. I think I have a question for you, Eric. What is the latest applications that FAO uses? And then do we have anything available, AI applications?
I had a slide with a list which is published actually, strangely enough, on the ITU website. I think that's a good first start to understand where we are. And this is mainly on using AI for structured data, so to say, the classical machine learning stuff. I don't think we have anything out there at the moment which is using large language models. We do use large language models already internally, but you wouldn't find yet, I believe, products on our website who do so. But they will arrive, yes.
Thank you, Eric. Another question is, I am just trying to interpret. I think that this person wants to ask you that how can we coordinate the work together with the member states related to innovations, including AI? What is the general recommendation from the innovation side?
I believe, of course, the FAO has the classical mechanism that member states can give priorities to FAO to indicate that AI is or is not important for the work of FAO. So this is one mechanism. For instance, the slide which I showed on the FAO principles for AI, this is yet an internal document. And whether we should publish more guidance and so forth, this is also, we rely on signals from member states like, yes, FAO should do this or not. I mentioned also the dialogue. This is one thing where we can really bring things together. So of course, I rely also on Marcus and Masami to kind of guide the community for food safety and AI. And through these days like today, we can bring things together and pick up on signals. We don't have a very concrete community where these specific requests can come together, but on LinkedIn there are communities where also individual can express. For instance, the e-agriculture community is a community where you can express your ideas on where FAO should go regarding this topic.
Thank you, Eric. There is just a comment from Ghana that they want to be one of the global innovation hosts. So that's one thing to note. And another question is, have there been any efforts to do an AI stock taking at FAO?
Well, that would be that internal paper which is not published. Yes, we do internal stock takings. This is also part of the AI coordination team. So yes, so the answer is yes, but it's not published yet.
I think it will be last question unless I have something from the floor. The question is that when you talk about the Kaggle, and all they are straightforward numbers data set. So what about the food systems with the very complex data? What is your insight?
Sorry, you remember the Rome call for AI ethics? Okay. Yes, so I'm not sure whether I fully have understood the question, but regarding the complex data, AI is as good as the data which goes into it. And this is where I sometimes notice that people are frustrated that AI is got so much momentum and hype, while the importance of having proper data standards, data governance, and so forth is probably equally important. I'm probably more positive that I believe that with the momentum of AI, we have also to work on the complexity of data and including its standards and so forth.
Agenda item, I will be very quickly explain why data are important in the area of food safety. So my presentation title is called Power of Data in the Food Safety Context. I just put 4 different reasonings that why data is so important in the area of food safety. The first, that it will help making the informed decision. We have evidence-based, science-based, risk-based problem identification, prioritization, resource allocation, all issues that we have to make the decisions will be very much benefited from data. So this is something that we primarily use the food safety data to make the informed decision. Also, we can use the data to set the success measures. For example, that risk management decisions need to be often validated, evaluated, monitored, and then data do help in this sense. And then also that this is very useful to understand where to start the improvement if it is necessary. So basically we can know that where we are, what to do next, what to improve, what we can predict based on the data. And then also the data can promote transparency communication, that the decisions that the risk managers are making in the area of food safety, it can be backed up by data, and then this can be communicated to the general public so that general public understand why the decisions are being made based on the data. So those are the 4 key the reasons why data are important. And then I think that the most of the audience today are in the area of food safety, I believe, but then some of you are not really coming from the food safety area. So I'm going to explain about this generic food safety risk analysis paradigm. We have 3 components in the food safety risk analysis. One is risk assessment, another is risk management, and then last one, very important, risk communication. And then in the risk assessment, which is the essential component, all of them are essential components for the risk analysis, but then this is more or less the first component that we have to base upon, is really requiring the data. And then we have to do the hazard identification, then characterization, we have to do the exposure assessment, and then risk characterization so that we can really assess the level of the risks. But then all of them require concrete, reliable, quality data. And then without it, basically risk assessment is not really possible. And then if risk assessment is incomplete, then risk management is becoming very difficult. And then managers cannot really make the proper decisions without science backing up of their decisions. And then thus the communication becomes less transparent and then weaker. But then when we go to countries or when we review the country situations, lots of time that particularly in those low and middle income countries or countries who are requiring lots of technical assistance, they do tell us that there is no or limited amount of data available in the countries. And then there is no access, there is no consolidated data set, and then how those data that they may have a little can can be validated? Those are the questions we always receive. And then oftentimes that we are told that they have no capacity or limited capacity. We don't have enough capable technical people who can analyze the data, use the data. So this is the limitations and then challenges that we often receive when we try to give the technical assistance for food safety improvement. However, oftentimes, if we dig in, what happens is that we do find some data. And then some university or research institutes do have data, and then that's something that we can really use. But then the problem is that it is not curated, and then also it's not consolidated so that it is not going to create a big set of usable data. And then often some data are generated on an ad hoc basis, like something that are reactive or for the pure research purpose only. But then another set of data that, for example, secondary data, for example, it's not really relevant to food safety, but in population data, demographic data, and then climate data, all kind of different secondary data is available. And then it is not really usually looked at when we deal with the food safety issues. And then in terms of the limited capacity, that what FAO often help with the country is that we promote this international collaboration. Let's learn from each other, learn from experienced people so that we can really understand how data can serve the purpose. And then also, potentially we can find similar data set elsewhere, which may be useful in a way of thinking about how to use the data. And then I think all those ideas of tapping into the expertise outside, as well as looking into the secondary data set, maybe some inspirations when we talk about AI, because we have a case study presentation today that they will be talking a lot about those potential of the AI. So hopefully that you will get this idea later on from their case study presentations. And then I just wanted to show you that what kind of tools available at FAO using the data. So we have this risk assessment tool, and then we use the data to make the risk assessment, and then various different topics, for example, microbiological contamination, chemical contamination, and then also the chemical additives, residues, all kind of food safety hazards will be risk assessed, but then that require data, and then we use the data that are submitted to FAO, and then we make the risk assessment. But then oftentimes that we realize that those data are coming from the particular part of the world, and then we don't really find those good substantial chunk of data from certain areas on the globe. And then that will create a bias and then some skewed result possibly if there is a geographical implications in the risk assessment. Therefore, we do have this guide for risk ranking to consider, even if there is no data, that how we can try to have a risk ranking of the food safety hazards. So those tools are very, very useful tools. And then science-based risk assessment and risk ranking are very, very good prioritization of the food safety hazards. But at the same time that I am very excited about this seminar, because we can see another open door with the AI that our experts will be talking about, to see that there might be some other possibility with the technical advancement to see that the prioritization of the food safety hazards may be possible. So this is the area that I would like to look into, and then FAO is very much interested in learning more about. And this is my last slide, that I just wanted to highlight that the global food safety can benefit from data, information, science, technology, and innovation. This is really like no doubt. But the first take-home message is that collaboration is key, that we really benefit from the academic and research institute who are making a huge efforts, not only AI, but then AI particularly today. And then also the FAO assistance that we are planning to do is that as much as we learn from the AI experts, that we would like to consider how those information and how those AI application, responsible use of it can help the low and middle income countries. And then I think that this is such a good example of an innovative approach. And we want to go with this innovative approach for the transformation of the agri-food systems. And then once again, that I would like to stress that this can be, I think Derek said the same thing, that this shouldn't be the primary decision-making tool, but then this can be a very good prioritization tool. And then with that, I would like to close my presentation. Thank you very much. So talking and facilitating at the same time, but then I know that I see that some questions, I mean, probably not for me because I received those questions when Eric was talking about, but then I think it is a good time to talk about this. Few overall questions to all the experts that people are saying that how can AI be used for the novel food regulations? But then my question, I will turn it into the floor, who is the next speaker. But then have you seen any AI applications applied to the novel food, meaning that the GMO, gene edited food or something that is new? Have you seen in your research?
Well, one thing that I know people are working on, is not published yet, but also we at Wageningen Food Safety are working on, is using AI to be able to predict whether a novel food would be an allergen. So looking at protein structures to see how that would match known allergens to be able to predict allergenicity. So that's one example of what people are doing. Other things that people are looking into at Wageningen, but I'm sure at other places as well, is what the effect of novel foods would be on the gut microbiome and health effects via that route. So I think there's a lot going on. I have to say, in the literature review that we did with FAO, I haven't seen many examples published yet that use machine learning.
Thank you, Flor. The next question is for Eric, that how FAO, can FAO help the responsible use of AI?
Yes, I think we have a big role to play there. That's why I'm happy we started with a Rome call for AI ethics, and we have now our internal principles, which I called FAO self-governance, so it's inside. The UN has the AI for Humanity report. And I believe that in all of the work that we do, we need to have the AI capabilities hand in hand with AI governance. And for me, AI ethics or responsible use of AI is all part of AI governance. And I also believe that, for instance, we know that AI will cause changes in the labor force. And therefore, it needs to be part of FAO's working model that we have policies who anticipate on that, so that all these effects are not going to the extreme, and at least we try to anticipate on it. Oh.
Thank you, Eric. Another question, I think, for Marcus and Eric, I think that how do you think that Africa will benefit from AI applications and innovations while that Africa lacks most infrastructure?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very important question, and of course a question for which there's probably no good answer at the moment. I think to start with, all the current AI models are incredibly resource intensive. They need a lot of compute, which means a lot of infrastructure, data centers, energy. and that is not as developed at a level of infrastructure in Africa. They are also very data hungry, so huge amounts of data need to be shuffled around. Africa is not as well connected to the global internet infrastructure as other countries and areas, which will provide another limitation. However, having said that, also in terms of academic infrastructure, there's most likely, there's definitely fewer AI experts or academia and companies available in Africa to push that. Now, that would be the development, and maybe that's not where Africa needs to engage, where it's in the application. Still, the same limitations apply at the moment because it's incredibly data intensive and incredibly compute intensive to run these models, or high-speed internet. I mean, really big backbone internets need to be available. That's, as we discussed, not available. So there will be limitations as technology progresses. I'm sure some of these limitations will get smaller or go away, at which point then it might be much more readily adaptable to the local requirements in Africa. If, let's say, it can be reduced to the extent that it runs on cell phones, on local infrastructure, rather than on big data centers. This is all future. I think one of the big challenges, like with all technological development, is to, for us from a FAO perspective, is to evaluate what can we do to avoid the gap between high-income countries and low and middle-income countries increasing, that it just gets worse, rather than we find ways to help low and middle-income countries to continue to partake and benefit in those developments. Now, nobody has a good answer for that, so we're all happy for the discussion, the discourse, and any kind of engagement that may be possible there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Eric, please.
So very quickly, the high-income countries have a lot of data, therefore their models, AI models, perform just better. So there's a big problem in low and middle-income countries, lack of data. There is some technique, and I believe that Floor will talk about a little bit, it's about transfer learning, but that's not going to solve completely the problem of lack of data. We do play with the thought that it would be good to have more resources in the public space when it comes to AI. And there's a formal concept to that, digital public goods. There's also an alliance around it. And certainly part of our work will be really to position this digital public goods much more strategically so that the data and models are there. Because I believe that if we have a bit more in the public space, the entry-level barriers for lower middle income countries are also lower to start deploying AI, or for entrepreneurs to make a business out of AI, for instance, AI advisory service for farms. Oh.
Thank you, Eric. I think the floor has a question.
So thank you very much for just putting together all of these series of talks. I think that this is certainly the future of food safety, not just limited to food safety, but everything. Speaking on behalf of a regulatory agency, just concern over kind of the risk assessment process. It's all about what data goes into it, what is the model. And just kind of concern I could see happening is when you have an AI model that's even more based on the inputs, and perhaps running into a situation where we're exacerbating some of the issues that we currently see with risk assessment based on incomplete data or the quality of the studies. And speaking certainly of governance and how we manage that, what, I guess, suggestions perhaps could we start employing now to perhaps put some guardrails on how we put out some of these AI models for risk assessment purposes? Because I could instantly see how that could be a backlash on how regulators are then forced with some models saying this is dangerous, when maybe we have other data that's maybe incomplete where we're like, I don't know, we're not sure. How do we enter that space?
Just a quick, do you want? Okay, so just a quick thing on governance. When the Rome call for AI ethics came out, it was good. It's kind of sets the mindset. But then the problem is how to make it tangible. And I see that there are movements there, which is good. For instance, also Floor will talk about explainable AI, and that's one way to go for it. But I do believe that we need to have AI governance in the code itself. And some people refer to that to constitutional AI. And I believe that if we have the governance models implemented in AI models in the public space, then those models can control the commercial AI models. And that's maybe a difficult one to understand, but I think that if we can go in that direction, that would be good. Over.
Yeah, I think it was an excellent question, and a question which we struggle these days already. Because currently humans are making the decision which are the good data and the bad data and the shaky data. And everybody is entitled to their own opinion. And hence we have these ongoing discussions whether a specific data set has been overlooked by regulators or whether it's trustworthy enough and needs to be integrated and indicates a much larger problem that has been not addressed, and thus strong regulatory action would need to be taken. In the food sector, these come up every so often, these discussions about one food additive or another or whatever other effect you may have. At the moment, we have humans and you can discuss with humans, and it's more intuitive to humans to understand other humans, like there's a scientific education and you went to school here and there, and there's peer-reviewed journals and you grade them by impact factor or whatever else you use. We are used to these concepts. With AI coming up, there are other factors there. We need other forms of understanding on what these models do, on how they operate, and how do we need to think about their outcome. There is, of course, and we've seen it already in the media, that there is these, how should I put that, conspiracy thinking or just drama engagement, where people run some analysis somewhere and they find some weak correlation that demonstrates how the food industry is poisoning us all and will kill us eventually, or whichever way it goes. All of these things are then dominated by discussions about how great AI is, and how big the data was they analyzed. And humans are not used to think in those terms. And that's what I meant earlier with data literacy, with AI literacy. It's just like we all had to learn. I mean, I'm old enough. Some of you may not, but we all had to learn not to trust everything that's on the internet, right? We all had to learn that not to trust everything because it's printed in a newspaper doesn't mean it's the truth. So how do we establish this trust environment and this trust framework? Very, very difficult discussion these days, because we all see how the trust environment is fragmented currently, and everybody believes whomever they want to, because government authorities, the UN and others, do not enjoy that elevated, and churches neither, elevated status of trustworthiness that they once had. Now that's a bigger problem. It's a bigger discussion that I think only ongoing discourse, open, transparent, inclusive discussion will help eventually. In the meanwhile, it will remain difficult.
Food safety, and then this is the message for competent authority in food safety. And then we have stock take the applications of AI that are already publicly available to give the information about what kind of applications exist. And then the next speaker will be talking about the results of the literature synthesis, and then also some insights from the research point of view. So Marcus, can I give you a microphone to you to introduce the next speaker, please? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. It will be my distinct pleasure to introduce Floor van Meer. Floor works as a researcher in the data science at Wageningen Food Safety Research, University in the Netherlands, she has a broad background in nutrition, multivariate statistic, and neuroscience at the University Medical Center in Utrecht and Leiden University. And she's currently working at the junction and intersection of food safety, health, and data science. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction and for the invitation to be here today. I'll start with a short disclaimer that almost all of the pictures in my presentation are AI generated. So yes, as Masami mentioned, I'm going to be discussing the systematic literature review that we did in collaboration with FAO. And I want to answer a couple of questions with you today, starting with what is artificial intelligence? Marcus said he wasn't going to go in what exactly is AI and what is machine learning. I am. To have a bit of an overview that we're all talking about the same thing here. Then, of course, most importantly, how is AI being used for food safety at the moment, mostly from a scientific point of view? What trends can we see in published literature? And I'll also be talking something about explainable AI. When should you use AI and when should you not? And what could possible prerequisite activities be for using AI? So as a start, what is AI? Well, I think the official definition would be that it is AI if a computer or a machine performs tasks that would usually require human intelligence. So that we can think of pattern recognition, image processing, decision making. But that's still pretty broad, like a robot vacuum cleaner would still meet that definition. And that's not what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to be talking about mostly when we talk about food safety is machine learning. And machine learning is when a computer system learns and improves based on data. And it does that in order to make a decision or a prediction. Classical machine learning methods then use handcrafted features and features or variables. So an example could be, let's say that we want to develop a spam filter for your email. We can tell the spam filter it needs to look at the sender's address, it needs to look at the title or the subject of an email message, it needs to look over whether it or not has attachments. Now then we train this algorithm and it will come to a decision, this is spam or this is not spam. And then there's also deep learning. In deep learning, computer systems learn representations themselves without having features or variables put in. So for example, the typical data that a deep learning model might use are images or written text or language, speech, without having specific things to look at. Quite often when people talk about black box models, they talk about deep learning. As I said, deep learning quite often uses images. What is important to know and important to keep in mind for the rest of this talk is that machine learning and also deep learning needs a lot of data. And this data is generally separated into a training, validation, and a test set. In a training set, it will learn the representations, the validation test is used to optimize parameters, and a test set is used to determine the performance of the model. Well, a way that image processing models can be defined is by using this ImageNet challenge. So for example, you can ask the system, is this a dog or is this a muffin? You would think that is an easy question, but apparently that can still be pretty difficult. So this ImageNet challenge includes 15 million high resolution pictures in over 22,000 categories. And this is a way to then see how well an image processing network performs. And they're getting better very quickly. So we can see here that every year there's a top one network with the lowest amount of errors. And I believe this is even down to 7% now. Okay, that's all very nice, but that's still pretty far away from food safety. So what's already being done in food safety? Well, in order to do a literature review, we used AI. So we used AS review, which is a way to help do systematic search reviews. It uses active learning to make a prioritization of which papers you should include and which you shouldn't. Of course, you still look at them. The initial search that we did had 783 publications. In the end, we identified 141 relevant ones to include in our literature review. And when we look at food safety topics, it seems that most of the published research done right now has to do, using machine learning, has to do with microbiological hazards. Then there's also some more done on chemical contaminants, authenticity, foodborne illness, and other. And what I mentioned, other here is quite often food safety in general or food safety perception. So for some of these categories, I'd like to mention some examples. So to start with a microbiological hazard, for example, machine learning can be used to predict virulence of Listeria strains. And you can imagine knowing which Listeria strains are more virulent than others can have an effect on where you want to monitor, where you want to test for. Another very interesting paper, which had to do with tracking foodborne illness outbreak in real time, used mobile phone location and search data in order to try and track problematic venues for problematic restaurants. So what they did is they used people's location data on their telephones to see which restaurants they'd eaten at. And if then the next day they visited the CDC websites or Wikipedia page on foodborne illness, they used that to, per restaurant, see how often people searched for or visited these web pages the next day. And based on that, determine whether those venues should be inspected. And doing this, they were 3 times as effective in tracking down problematic venues. So when I read this paper, I figured, okay, how on earth do they get that kind of data? Because that's not quite, but then I saw that all the authors worked at Google. Another example of research that was actually done by a colleague of mine at Wageningen Food Safety Research is that we're always looking for new chemical contaminants that we should be monitoring for. But there's so many new papers coming out every year, trying to read them all. You can basically hire a whole new person to do all that. So my colleague Leonike developed an AI system in order to rank papers with whether they should be read or not, or whether they should probably be relevant or not. And in the end, she developed a dashboard in which, for example, this was a screenshot that she made for me of the fruit and vegetable dashboard, where you can see per type of food and per chemical contaminant what new papers or press releases or media coverage has come out about that. And it makes a ranking of which ones you should read and are highly relevant and which ones are probably not. Which, as you can imagine, saves a lot of time and effort for not having to read all those papers. So there's a lot more publications coming out about AI and food safety over the years. And there's also a lot more, a lot larger percentage of this is using deep learning. In 2019, that was 3 papers. Well, in 2023, that was already 18 papers. So that's really increasing very much. On the other hand, we also see that legislation is getting stricter on how you should use AI and how AI is allowed to be used. And for example, the AI Act of the European Union states that when a decision is being made based on AI, it should be transparent which parameters this was based on. And as I explained about this, especially these deep learning models, we don't really know, it's a black box. So how can you then use this? So one way of doing this is to use explainable AI. And in short, in explainable AI, you want to see what is happening in this black box. So explainable AI are explainable AI tools try to examine what parameters decisions are made on. Currently, most of these explainable AI techniques are being used post hoc, which means you first do a deep learning model and then afterward you try and track back what these decisions were based on. And why is this necessary? Well, let's say we have this black box model. We have trained this model. I haven't, but the people who published this. This model has been trained to recognize horses. And the algorithm says, yes, this is a horse. Very good, very correct. But this little heat map that's plotted next to it can show you what information in the picture this algorithm is using. And that's interesting. It's not actually looking at the horse, it's looking at the watermark in the corner there. And if you give it the same picture as an input without this watermark, it says this is not a horse. If you give a picture of a car with the watermark, it'll tell you it's a horse. Without the watermark, it's not a horse. So what happened is that in the training set, all of the pictures of horses had this watermark, which is from a very prolific horse photographer. So it was completely, for the training set, it was completely correct, but it's using the wrong information. And okay, this doesn't seem to be so very relevant, but it does get when you transfer this to other cases. For example, in this case where it tried to, in medical imaging, tried to identify COVID positive or COVID negative x-rays based on possible lung damage. And in this published paper, the algorithm was quite good at distinguishing these two. But when you use explainable AI, you see that the information it uses is where the R is placed on the X-ray. Because here, but as it turned out, all of the COVID positive X-rays came from a different hospital than all of the control X-rays. And this different hospital used a different X-ray machine where the R for which side it was on a different place. So again, it performed very well, but it used completely irrelevant information. And if you would give it different X-rays, it wouldn't perform well at all anymore. So after having said this, should we even still use AI? When should we use AI and when shouldn't we? Well, it's always a difficult decision, but in order to try and help people make this decision, we developed this bit of a flow diagram of considerations that people could have on whether or not to use AI. So the first thing that we found was very important is you need to have a problem or a research question. And if you have no research question or no problem, there's no use in using AI. There's no use in using AI just because it's there. Maybe you can if you're a computer scientist, but if you're looking really in the field of food safety, you need a research question or problem to answer, and a well-defined one as well. And yeah, we went so far to use it. If you cannot have a well-defined problem, maybe you just should not use it. Next step, and of course been mentioned before and very important, you need suitable data. And these data needs to meet the standards for AI. And we formulated some suggestions on what could you look at or what makes data suitable for using AI. Most importantly, it needs to be of sufficient quality and quantity. these models are data hungry. They really need a lot of data in order to function well. It also needs to fit your problem. If it doesn't fit your problem or a research question, again, it's not going to give you the results that you want. And for example, I can imagine what we run into a lot in data sets, and I imagine other people too, is that there's sometimes a very, very low amount of positive samples. If you're looking at contaminants, for example, and you have a very big data sets, but you have no positive samples, yeah, then you can't use that. So it needs to fit your problem. Of course, it's also very important that it's ethical, legal, and unbiased, and preferably that it also meets the FAIR standards. I'm not going to go into exactly what the FAIR standards are here, but it means it's findable, available, interoperable, and reproducible. So let's say we've met this criteria, we have good data, so we can continue to the next one. Then it's also important to identify an algorithm fit for your data type and your problem. So you will use different types of algorithms if you have image data, or if you have text data, and if you have tabular data. And tabular data is just you can imagine a regular sort of Excel file or CSV file with numbers. So depending on the data type that you have, you will want to look at your algorithm, of course, also at your problem. Do you want to predict something? Do you want to categorize something? And then if you have your data and you have your model, you can see if you find an answer based on that. Importantly, afterwards, when you're done, it would be very nice if people would consider sharing their data or their algorithm where possible and where appropriate, but that can really help the community as a whole move forward. So what can we do to be AI ready? What are possible prerequisite activities? Well, it's been mentioned before, but it's very important to develop good AI literacy and data management literacy. And that'll be mostly done through education. So in order to make informed decisions on all these considerations we mentioned in this flow chart, you need a certain level of understanding of what is happening in each of these steps. For example, yeah, there's algorithms out there that are sort of ready to use out of the box. But if you don't know like what the exact data it was trained on, for example, you can see how that can go wrong in those examples that I showed if your training set doesn't contain the right type of examples. Another important suggestion would be to establish collaborations and partnerships with, for example, academia or organizations such as FAO in order to be able to share knowledge and data and algorithms as much as we can. And I'd like to thank my collaborators here.
Thank you very much, Flor. So I will open the floor for the questions for her, and then basically that I think you mentioned, but then we collaborate with the various experts at Wageningen University, and then quite a few people contributed to this study. And then I see that online that lots of questions about the methods of our study, but then we will be publishing the paper in the first quarter of next year, 2025, and it has a full explanation about how the literature search was conducted. It is not easy to explain in a few minutes. So I think that I hope that you will be looking forward to this conversation. But then the one thing that I have noted, not so much to the Flor's presentation, but then I think that this is kind of important for FAO to answer. So I'm going to ask Marcus to answer first question, but then Flor, please stay there. And then the person is asking, does AI have access to all necessary data around the globe without restriction from all countries due to legislation to be able to gather sufficient data for their inclusion in the risk assessment? What do you think?
Thank you. No, it's a good question because it allows me to highlight several things. And I also want to point out that Flora, I think, made already reference to quite a number of the underlying conditions that need to be met. So please feel free to add, and Eric also mentioned that. So it's important to separate a few things. Most of the AI models are currently need to be trained. So they're supervised approaches. There are also approaches for unsupervised data evaluation, and they operate slightly differently. And different considerations have to be taken into account. So let's stick with those where AI has to be trained. And AI is by itself not able to tell truth from fiction, right from wrong, anything like this, not with any kind of supervised training models. We have to tell it what is right, what is wrong as per data set and for a lot of data sets. Otherwise, we get these arbitrary results like Flo mentioned with the R's in different positions and the X-rays that have no real reason. It was just too small of a data set, right? You need more X-ray machines where the R is then in more different positions. And then it becomes clearer to the algorithm that the R is not the relevant thing or the watermark is not the relevant thing. And so the question is not, does AI have access to all data? For a training of an artificial intelligence, the question is, what data do we want to use to train the model to be able to hopefully understand better what the outcome means? So it's not all data because we need to trust the data that we feed into the model to train it. And then hopefully we don't want to use all the data available because we don't necessarily trust all the data, or we don't understand whether we can trust it. So that's step one. Step two is data ownership. Who owns it, and do they even want to give it out? Do they even want to share it? Can they even share it from a legal perspective? Or if they can, do they want to? Just because data is available at some data storage facility doesn't mean that we are granted immediately access. And AI per se is a computer program. It doesn't have magical powers to pull data. It needs to be told where these data are stored. And so it requires the human to identify the data sources. It will not automatically find it. I mean, Google search is maybe the most magical thing that you can find in that regard, but it also doesn't find everything. And it doesn't give you any clue of well, the Google ranking allegedly has some clue towards the relevance, but only Google knows how that works. And whether that's still true or not, it used to be true more than it is right now because commercial interests got a little bit in the way of the ranking algorithm. So AI doesn't have magical powers yet. Humans have, and humans need to decide what data they want to consider. It is totally user-driven or human-driven. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. A quick question to Flora is that can the model and dashboard that you presented from your colleague, is it something that is available online, or is it something that is not available online?
Try and share the link to it later.
Thank you. And then I think we have a question from the floor.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So I'm thinking of that horse, not a horse example, and then certainly kind of combining that with the example of, from the Google paper, or I maybe ate this and then I searched at the website and how to trace that, potential for perhaps concern of where it's not necessarily anything government is doing, but maybe it's more in the maybe community, somebody else is doing this and they are perhaps tracking, I don't know, social media posts or something of I ate this and I got sick and I ate here. And so then it's kind of creating perhaps a false outbreak and harm for a company or for an image or small business, perhaps. How do we kind of frame that? Because I mean, that's very difficult to do when it's out in the public space and somebody, you have access to X, for example, or something on Facebook. Because I can imagine it's very difficult, right, even for food safety professionals to be able to pinpoint what made somebody ill. But if you ask people, they sometimes are like, oh yes, I ate this and that's what made me sick. And you're like, that's a very difficult question. That's food safety professionals can't even guarantee. So I mean, I guess it's all in the context of framing for the appropriate use. And I don't know if it's a question, it's just certainly that I could see as a concern.
To me, and this comes back maybe a bit of a broader discussion and that we also had a bit earlier. To me, especially if you use a bit more of a black box things, these are sort of hypothesis generating, meaning that if even in the Google paper, the example was that you use it to monitor certain restaurants more often. You can't use it to say we need to close this restaurant because people say they're getting sick from it. So something similar, I think, would be with a lot of things. Let's say that somehow in articles or somewhere you find a certain contaminant seems to pop up more often in a certain food. Yeah, then you still have to go to the lab and test it, right? It's a hypothesis that's formed and maybe a signal or an alert of, hey, something might be going on here, but you'll still have to find out what it exactly is. So I know we also came across some of these papers in our literature review that they're using, for example, Twitter feeds in order to see also for problematic venues, but also for upcoming risks. Yeah, I think there is very good to remain critical, and especially also that there might be all kind of biases going on here. Like certain people who tweet about having a sore tummy might visit different restaurants than people who don't. And there's
So one last question from the chat, that this person's interest is on education in the field of AI. Are there any recommended courses that we can take advantage of, especially in developing countries?
I believe there's a number of also free online courses that you can take. I'm going to look at the rest of the people. I don't by heart have a recommendation for one over any of the others. Yeah, I think it's probably good to look at ones that are affiliated with either academic institutions or with sort of your big software companies to know that you're getting the right information.
Thank you. So that could be potentially a FAO's role to collaborate with the academic institutions to see that if that is possible. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Flora, for the wonderful presentation. So we will move on to the case study. So we have three country case studies to present. The first person is from the UK government, the Food Standards Agency. And then I am going to put him on. Is he online? Jesus, are you online? Can you hear us? Okay, perfect.
I am. I hope you can hear me, and can you see me as well?
Yes, we can see. And can you start sharing your slides, please?
Yes. Can you please let me know if you can see the slides? Sorry, can you see the slides?
If you could, yes, perfect. Then you can, yes,
You can see them now. Great. Okay.
perfect. We can see it.
Good, thanks. Good day, everyone from London. My name is Jesus Alvarez Piñera. I am the head of data at the Food Standards Agency in the United Kingdom. And today I'm going to be talking to you about our experience, our journey really, in creating a service that has been utilizing data and complex data analytics, including AI tools, to maintain food safety and authenticity. So a little bit of an introduction in terms of who we are. The Food Standards Agency is a UK government department with responsibilities across England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Scotland has a different food standards agency. And our fundamental mission is to ensure that food is safe and that it is what it says it is. So it is safe and it is authentic. And we support this mission with several activities. We advise ministers on food safety and food authenticity issues. So we make policy. We also commission a lot of research that informs our decisions by generating evidence. And then we regulate businesses either directly, like for example, big meat businesses, or through the local authorities in these different areas in the UK. And we also monitor consumer interests and opinions and try to apply as many standards as we can to food and data related to food. You can also see a few numbers. Last year we managed over 2,000 food incidents in the UK. Almost 100%, but not quite, of meat businesses are compliant with our food safety, hygiene, and animal welfare regulations. Another activity that we have taken on recently is, when there is a new product entering the UK market, we need to make sure that it's safe for consumers. So we have managed 400 applications for new products to be marketed in the United Kingdom. And on top of looking at food safety and food authenticity for products that are nationally produced, the UK imports a huge amount of food from the rest of the world, most of it from the European Union. So we also need to have to monitor the food safety of those products coming to our borders. So this is, I don't expect anyone to be able to read everything that is in the slide, but it's just a representation of the food system, and you can see that is very, very complex. The food system is basically an agglomeration of food industries, and every party in that in the food system has a different way to store, communicate data. So it is nothing is standardized, and every arrow that you see in the diagram is probably a data transfer and information flowing from one party to another. So the food system is also a data system, and this is a huge challenge for regulators, because understanding all that flow of information in different formats and with different templates it requires a huge human effort. So this is where we have tried to focus our activity by utilizing data analytics and AI to try to automate gathering information instead of doing it by with humans. So why is data important? It is important for regulators like us, because we need the evidence to.
Sorry, Jesus, you were muted now. So sorry, I think it's system glitch. I'm sorry.
Okay, let me see if that works. And it's important. It's important for businesses to improve their food safety practices, and it's important for consumers because they need access to reliable information to keep trusting the food system. But to unlock the value of data, we just need to create the correct conditions. So the data needs to be available, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be usable. Personal information needs to be protected. Intellectual property information needs to be protected. So I think this is, the key aspect. We need to make the data of sufficient good quality to be able to use it across different players. And this is the fundamental aspect. The data quality is essential for whatever Gen AI tool that you are going to use in the future. Sorry, I'm getting some echo. It's gone now. And why is that important? It is important because data quality enables traceability. If there is a problem, we need to trace it back to the source. It also allows you to become more predictive. If we have, climate information affecting specific crops, we can predict whether that crop is going to be contaminated with something like aflatoxins, for example. It allows us to share the data with others, and it's supportive of decision making. You need to have good data to be able to make sound decisions. So this is where we have seen the most potential for AI tools, and it's in increasing the data quality of the data that we have, and we want to get it right before we move into some bigger Gen AI projects. So I agree with Marcus. I don't really like talking about traditional AI versus Gen AI, but they are slightly different. And so far, most of our activity has been on using traditional AI tools. And how do we use them? As you can imagine, most of the data that we get is unstructured. It's just a report that someone has written, so it's just text, and there is no standard. Everything is everybody writes in a slightly different way. So we have applied AI technologies mostly to utilize their capabilities for information extraction, for standardization of the data, and also for classification of the data. So, for example, if we get a food alert, it is helpful to take that specific food alert and classify it as a product type, because that's going to inform our risk level. It's not the same to have a food alert related to a product of animal origin than to have it referring to a chocolate bar, for example. The level of risk is different, so that's why we want to classify it according to risk. And so this allows us to link data sets and aggregate records, and with that we can identify trends and potential risks. And I'll show you an example later. And I think, as Eric was mentioning before, it is essential that we comply with the data governance. So we need to have an ethical wrapper around any data product that we create. So privacy impact assessment needs to be made. We also need to check constantly or regularly that the model is still performing, because situations change and the model might be just doing the same analysis stuck in time, and something might have changed. So you need to update the model. And also very important, you need to have a human, you need to have an expert in the loop to validate the outputs of any of these tools. And why do we use traditional AI when everybody is talking about Gen AI and LLMs? We use traditional AI because we think that we want to ensure that we use the right tool for the right task. And without wanting to be negative, Gen AI has a huge environmental cost. And I think Reuters reported last week that Gen AI queries have now exceeded the aviation industry in terms of global greenhouse gas emissions. So there is also that consideration to make. So the first use case that I'm going to show you is what we call our signals dashboard. And this is a short-term horizon scanning tool that allows us to see signals, which are food alerts of any type. It could be a food recall made by a supermarket. It could be a border rejection. It could be any communication from a competent authority saying this product has an issue. So the way we have developed this is by looking at the most important for us, the most important sources of data. Most of them are our equivalent in other countries, so it's competent authorities. And we also ingest data from some trusted media sources. So how do we do this? We basically scrape the data, or we use APIs when they are available, and we ingest that information. Some of them are going to be in English, so there is no need for translation, but some of them are not, so that needs to be translated, and we use Azure Translate to be able to do that. And then once that information is stored, ingested into the FSA data state, we use NLP, natural language processing and artificial intelligence techniques for extracting the information and for standardization. So what do we look for? So we look for the product, we look for the hazard, and we look for the country of origin as a minimum. And then we standardize that into an unstructured format. And then this information, once we have like a table, a master table with information, we feed a dashboard that is what you see on the right of the screen, and that is what the end users can access. This on top of that, we have an API, so some people can prefer to consult the information on the dashboard via an API. So in that process, I'm going to go back one. In this process, not everything is AI. We have seen that there is value in AI to address a specific task. So in that previous end-to-end process, we use the following AI tools. We use, as I mentioned before, we use Azure Translate to translate text into English. We use BERT, but the encoder-only transformer architecture. So this is not Gen AI. It doesn't generate content. So we use the BERT model for classifying signals as food, feed, or food contact materials. So whether something is food or not, something is feed or not. We use TensorFlow sentence encoder, generates sentence embeddings to match products and hazards against preset dictionaries. And then we also use part of speech tagging for pattern matching. So that tells you whether something is a noun or an adjective. And I'll show you how the sentence embedding work. So this is an example of input text, but they vary a lot. There is no standard for that. So the first step is cleaning and noun checking the text. And then the next phase just removes the non-product phases. So this allows us to remove the phrases from the string so that they are not mistaken for the product. So and this is quite a complex process, but many alerts might be referring to peanut allergy or egg allergy, and that can be easily confused with a product. Is peanut the hazard or is peanut the product? So that's what the phrase matcher is trying to do. And then finally we match our result to something that we have stored in a dictionary. So in this case, it's gluten-free baked breads. The best match is gluten-free bread. So that is how it works. An example of how this has been used in the past. So our incidents team identified by using this dashboard that there had been a big increase on the number of global alerts for listeria in enoki mushrooms. There was no outbreak in the UK at the moment, but there was clearly a consumption of this product, and consumption of the uncooked contaminated product is a very serious health risk. So what they did was they undertook a testing program carried out by port health authorities and local authorities, and they detected high levels of listeria. So that allows us to mitigate that specific risk. And this is done regularly with the signals dashboard. And I'm gonna tell you about a couple of examples where we use Gen AI. And we use it in cases where the task is more complicated. Again, by default, we use traditional AI. And everybody, as some of my previous presenters have mentioned already, there is a big buzz about Gen AI and LLMs. They are developing very, very quickly. They have a huge potential to improve the data available to us and others to make data-driven decisions. But they come with a risk. Everything that is in the open domain, every open tool, basically when you give data to the model, you are putting it in the open domain. So there is a risk of a data breach. And then there are also problems determining the veracity of the outputs because they are surprisingly convincing. And you need a human in the loop to check that the output is correct. So to mitigate this risk, any project that we undertake utilizing Gen AI is assessed in line with 8 principles that have been published by the Central Digital and Data Office in the United Kingdom. And this is similar to what Eric was sharing before. Everybody has some principles that we should all follow when using Gen AI tools. The principles might vary, but they are quite similar. I think the most important to me is the human in the loop, the last one. You need an expert deciding whether the output is correct or not. And a real example where we have used this, we have used it with sampling results. So extracting key information and data from text is very challenging. We get around 40,000 sampling results in the form of reports every year. So it's a huge task. As I was mentioning before, there is no standard, so there are multiple ways to report a sampling result. You can say no milk protein was detected, or you can say milk protein was under significant levels or was under a particular unit. So there is no standard. So what we wanted to do was to improve being able to share and link the information and extract the intelligence faster. And we use OpenAI GPT via an existing Azure subscription. So we were not putting things in the open domain. And we needed to include this contextual information to structure the data. So we needed to make it tabular and accessible in dashboards. And you have an example in the slides. So basically, it's extracting the relevant information. It's quite complex, but it feels like it understands the language, and it normally gets it right. Not always. So we have like an 80% rate of success, and this is why it is essential that there is a human in the loop, just checking that the results make sense. And so how all this helps us? It helps us because, as with the enoki mushroom example that I shared previously, we can detect emerging risks affecting the UK. There was no outbreak in the UK at the time, so you just kind of like see it coming. You can produce a quick risk assessment. Like you can calculate the likelihood of the UK being impacted by that enoki mushroom incident. And you can plan sampling programs to make sure, again, this is something that Flor mentioned, you get a signal. It's just an indication, it might be wrong, but then you develop the tools through a sampling program to make sure that risk is real. And then you contact, the manufacturers that might be affected by this, in this case, by the enoki situation. Another example that we have developed is the international disease monitoring model. The plus is only there because there was this is a second version, and basically is a risk categorization tool that provides risk scores for products of animal origin from specific countries due to microbial risk. And we use this information to inform the border checks, the checks that we implement at the border when these products come in. So what is the role of this service, this data service, which we call strategic surveillance? So we just provide the clean and up-to-date data. We make sure that we ingest the relevant data that is recent and that goes into the model to inform, the rate of border checks. It eliminates the manual cleaning of the data, and it allows spending more time in the the important thing, which is the analysis of the data, which needs to be done by a human. So just a final remarks. AI allows us to make data accessible and user-friendly. Some data sets are enormous, like for example, our trade data set is just billions and billions of rows, and it's very difficult to consult. So you use AI to make it more accessible and to create a dashboard that allows you to slice and dice the information. Traditionally, high quality data has been essential for a good AI outputs. I think Eric mentioned that if you give bad data, you are going to get bad outputs. But we have tried to use AI to improve the quality of the data by standardizing processes and automating some of those processes. And Gen AI in particular will allow us to unlock more valuable insights within the food industry. But a word of caution, it is essential to use AI responsibly and recognize that it's a tool to achieve our goals rather than an end in itself. And this is just going back to that tremendous hype that there is about Gen AI at the moment. Everybody wants to use it, but is it the right tool for what we are trying to achieve? And that is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jess. I have a few very quick questions from the online chat. The first quick one, yes and no, is that is it possible to have the access to the dashboard that you showed us when you were talking about traditional AI for the food safety professional outside of your agency? And then the next question is that FSA, is blockchain technology part of the AI initiatives? Over to you.
On the first question, the tool is at the moment for internal use only. There is nothing preventing us from sharing it more externally. But one consideration, the data that goes into the tool has been selected for the UK specifically. Those are, those competent authorities where we ingest data from are basically our main trading partners. So it might not be immediately usable by other countries. So in any case, the code behind the dashboard is published. We try to publish everything by default. I can point you to that code in GitHub. The second question in relation to blockchain, I think you said, Masami? Yes. So we have explored, everybody has done blockchain, right? Like everybody is exploring that. We have shown that we use it for export certificates. And there was another use case. But in any event, I think the technology, we have demonstrated that the technology works. Our limitation, we saw that the limitation was the data sharing across multiple parties. And for that, we have been working with several universities in the UK to establish a data trust, because it's very easy to agree between two parties. I'm going to give you this data and you give me this. But when there is information that is accessible but cannot be accessed by every single member of the supply chain, that becomes a little bit of a challenge. So that's where we have been focusing our activities lately.
Thank you. I think we have a question from the floor.
Yep. Thank you very much for a really nice presentation. A couple of questions and comments. First of all, I was wondering if there is a publication related to the your flow AI-based signal for food safety. Is there any publications? Have you published your workflow?
No, we haven't. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yes, just to discuss, because I was wondering how many false positive you could have in your flow. I mean, sometimes, as you mentioned in your example, there has been some sampling improvements or increasing due to these signals. I was wondering if there is some false positive, what happened in the system, just a kind of validation, I mean.
Yeah, in terms of, I mean, this is a little bit old now. It's probably a couple of years old. We did an evaluation of just comparing the traditional approach to sampling with a more targeted sampling using the signals dashboard. And that increased the detection of non-compliances by 30%. So basically what I'm trying to say is that, you know, when you are informed that there is a risk somewhere, especially in a country where we have well-established trading routes, the probability of you having that problem also increases, right? So that's what we compare it to, just like more random or more I don't know, the traditional sampling approach, and that, you know, that yield good results. I mean, it's 30%. I don't know if it's much or it's a lot or not. And I'm sure there is a lot of things that we don't detect. There are a lot of things that, you know, just go through and you never find out, thankfully.
Yeah, if I can add the second comments, it's important to let you know that there also in EFSA there is some project using LLM. I'm talking about now for the slide of the sampling data. I mean, there is also a project in EFSA trying to have using LLM to get the FoodX2 terms that we could be
Yes.
really related with your work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we have, well, we had closer links with EFSA previously, obviously. And it's a pity we don't have them now, but we are aware of that work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Last very quick question from the online chat. It's that I think it is similar to what Adriano was asking, but then how many points of data did you have to use to make the strategic surveillance? I think this person is talking about the inspection tool to be able to rely on the results.
Well, fortunately, we had you know, a lot of data going back for years. I cannot remember the number of data points, but you know, we had data going back 5 years. I think that was the historical data that we used to inform the model, and then create you know, we created some predictions to see if we was getting it right, and then we just deployed the live model. And sorry, I don't remember the number of, but it was a significant amount of data. That's true.
Thank you very much for connecting with us, Jesus. Thank you. And then thank you for the very good, interesting presentation.
No, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. So next speaker is Adriano. So I think that he's going to explain, this is quite interesting because he's going to explain the case study where the data is limited.
Thank you, Masami, for inviting me to present our experience in machine learning. And yes, very nice presentation. Taking underlying how is important to use and AI, and how could be the different things to take attention on. In this context, in our scenario, we have a kind of data a bit different and more complex than traditional images or words, sentences. We are talking about genomics. We are talking about the classical in bracket, trying to predict phenotypes in microorganisms, reading the genotype, just reading the DNA in I try to simplify a lot my presentation. I'm reading the DNA of pathogens. I would like to understand how is the phenotypes. For instance, if it could be resistant for antibiotic, if it could be virulent, if it be, in this case, if there are, in this scenario, I'm trying to predict if there are some adaptation of the pathogen to a specific food. It's very important, especially when there are outbreaks, because as Flor explained very well the fact that there is a possibility that persons are sick because they eaten something previously. During outbreaks, normally you ask to interview. There are interviews to sick persons trying to understand what they've eaten in the past. But for some pathogen, this could mean even weeks before. So it's very difficult to rely on that interview. So if there are some signals coming from the genotype itself of the pathogens found in a sick person, could be absolutely useful. So the study, yes, it is. We have a data set with the genomics data inside and the phenotypes. In this case, the phenotypes is it's been sampled the pathogens in milk or in meat or in fruit and so on. We trained a number of machine learning techniques. Here we are talking about machine learning and not deep learning. And we try to provide an outcome as a percentage of probability you could be, the pathogen is adapted on an environment or in another. Then we use this kind of results to, to test the accuracy of those methods. We published these results where we taken data set with phenotypes labels, like coming from fruit, vegetable, meat, fish, dairy, the samples. We are talking about 1,000 of samples of isolates and then of genomic sequences. And we got good results in be able to predict the label like meat, vegetable, and so on. Now, it's so nice, etc. But whenever you work with the AI and machine learning, it's important to the importance of data set has been underlined very well by my colleagues. Yes, whenever we try to change the data sets with additional data sets and something could happen if there are not good trust or of the labels, if you are not exactly sure about, something could be wrong. Indeed, if we try to merge the data sets, international data set that we can see here in the left, 1,000 samples, together with almost 2,000 or 3,000 samples coming from private companies' data, so are not publicly available. It's not the accuracy, as you can see, is not exactly the same as initial. What happened here? So these are our hypotheses. The second data set could be unbalanced data set with respect to food labels, more meat than fruit or than things. This is important to remember, though, to be balanced. Also, from geographical point of view, most of the private comes from our national reference laboratory in Italy, so Italian specific samples, with respect to the international ones that are broader distributed in around the world. But one important point is the reality. The reality is that there are possibilities there to have wrong food labels. So we can call it noise, like the noise that we have seen in the beautiful slide with the photos of dogs and cakes together. There are noises, but this is the reality. You have to try to understand, to catch information where there are noise. This is the reality. And here is more or less one of bad situation we can find, this case of food label assignment. I'm trying to explain why. This is a typically, I would say, conversation between the AI experts trying to understand which are the labels and asking, oh, you got this sample. What is the matrix of these samples? Of course, yes. I can answer immediately. Meat. Oh, very good. I put it immediately in my model. Are you sure? No, I don't. Okay. And I'm sorry, but it is really the reality. Sometimes you are not sure that that label assignment is correct or not. And yes, I can make this sentence reverse with nice slides related to the COVID-19. There you have a images where you say COVID-19 positive, negative, positive. Okay, now I put a new image of a person and you say that it's COVID positive. Who's this person? How can I test if it's true or not? You rely on the trust that the image that is being provided should be COVID positive, but you have not the possibility to test. Because if you are not the person, that you cannot take the blood and test it, you cannot be sure. Okay, there are a lot of situations where the trust is important, and sometimes you cannot be. There are other studies related with the smoked persons saying to find some genetic probability of having cancers. But a lot of these studies based on the fact that someone said to you, I am a smoker, or I'm not a smoker, is something that you not even test anymore whenever you are at the end. So the reality is that you have to accept, if possible, estimate the noise you have in your data set. In our case, we have the possibility to manage this situation, reducing the labels we would like to predict, going to a simple situation, meat and not meat. Well, when we go in this way, we receive a lot of high accuracy results. And more or less, we are able to produce an expert system that we immediately used as a prototype in our national GenPath platform. It's a bioinformatic platform of microorganisms and pathogens, especially related with listeria. We provided to the National Reference Laboratory the trained system with just the possibility to test meat or not meat. Taking consideration it's important information during an outbreak investigation to have, yes, meat or not meat. It's not so small information. And that we can say it works. I mean, here we have olives and swine-based meat product. Yes, it's able, with a high percentage rate, able to understand if there is a meat-based product coming from the pathogen from the not meat. I would like also to say another important things that, as you see in this results comes not exclusively from data coming from outside, but also from international data sets available, international and publicly available data sets. That's very important to try to implement AI-based methods also in LMICs countries, because this is another exercise we are conducting in this moment to try to understand how a listeria, predictive listeria can be resistant or not to some, like in this case, benzalkonium chloride. That is a classical way of cleaning meat product factories and so on. Sometimes there is, why? Because in the listeria we have a lot of situation where there is a resistance. You find the same sample, the same isolate after months, even if there have been some cleaning in factories. Yes, this is the case that even if we have not so many samples in our data store, we can have from outside, from a publicly available database, a lot of samples. A lot of samples. We are talking about thousands of samples. This is important, is an example that could be useful also whenever you would like to test some specific phenotypes in some countries that have no data, or just says I have few data. Don't worry about it. We can just try to test some study using, if there are possibilities, like in this case, publicly available data, and then try to test your data, as the case of the listeria. When we tested the olive and the meat, we can just have some kind of result in this way. So there are a lot of data out there we could use to, after a while, test also data coming from LMICs. So I hope to add some good news for having the possibility to use AI also in low data scenarios, we can say. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Laura, please.
Apologies if I'm getting too technical. I've seen quite some cases as well, if there's a little amount of data, that people use generative AI for synthetic data creation. Have you ever considered that, or what is your opinion on the usefulness?
Yes. We know these methods, and we also use these methods for balance the labels. It is a classical way to use these things whenever you have two unbalanced data sets. So we try to build up a more balanced data set. In our study, this changed very few the situation. You know, yeah, this I'm not provide the slide, but all your discussion was very interesting to me, because the genomics is something different from the examples you provided. I mean, whenever you use a machine learning or deep learning for images, there could be, let me say this way, a curator like a human that say, oh, this is a cake, this is a dog. I can say, yes, the method had some errors. When you use sentences, words, and you have that or translation, and you see the translation is not good, you are immediately in genomics. If you say this sample is this one or is not this one, and there is an error, it's not so easy to say that. Not sometimes we have to test the samples in laboratory. It's not an answer of 1 second. It's an answer of some days. If it is resistant or not to an antibiotic, you have to test it. You cannot say the method, I understand the method is wrong, so I can improve the, it's a bit more difficult to, yes, to understand if there are hallucination, if there are the method is not completely correct, because you're not able to answer immediately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions here? I see one question online. It's a bit complicated, but then I will try my best to read. So why do you have the split ratio design of the 75-25? Why not to use 65-25-20? So this is the first question, or 70-20-10.
Oh, you mean the division training, the testing was a classical Pareto distribution, 80-20. Then we tried several other similar division. Yes, I was not going too in deep on the publication. The publication would like to explore several methods, several machine learning methods, several input, because from genomics data you can provide different inputs, not want to go too in detail, and several division trainings between trainings and testing data set. We try to understand which are the best situation. We didn't go directly 80-20 division, or we tried a bit of several things. And what we provided at the end, it was the best results we could have.
Okay, this person has quite a few questions in the, so I will try to read everything, but then we can start, choose whichever you want to answer. There was the model hyper-tuned. What about the precision recall and F1 score? Is there any other techniques have been used, such as K-fold, nested cross-validated, or nest cross-validation?
Yes, I I can simply answer. Please go and see the paper, because in the paper there are all the details that have been asked in the questions. Again, the paper was about testing several methods and several parameters, and there are results for all these kind of testing. So I just explain a bit the story of how complicated is the trusting on the input data. But in the paper there are also all the details of the several methods mentioned there.
I also try to educate myself about all the methodologies, but then what I am seeing is that currently at the level of the development of the AI technologies, that researchers are trying to have all the trials and then repeat the trials with the different techniques. That's what I see. And then could you elaborate a bit more about this?
Yeah. Absolutely, yes. And in this moment, there are a lot of possibilities also online and free online tools to test your data with, like in our cases, the input data, in our cases, genomics data, and the phenotypic is the ground truth we would like to predict. There are a lot of tools also online where you can try directly to have an idea of which could be the best methods. However, in our case, just to have an answer for this, for random forest and XGBoost was the best results methods in our cases. Just to add something more, we are not so confident to use deep learning so far with these methods because of the black box and the hallucination and so on, and having the so difficult input data that is not exactly human readable to say, yes, it's wrong, or yes, it's right. We are not so confident to, and also because deep learning to have good results needs a larger quantity of data and high quality data if you would avoid. So the fact of the noise is the presence of noise. For the moment, I'm not so confident that deep learning is so directly applicable.
Marcus, please.
Thank you. Just a question out of interest, and it goes probably to both of you, Flora and Diana. So I'm going to date myself. In the 90s, I've done some work on multivariate statistics and univariate statistics for chemical analysis, analytical methods. And so partially square and non-parametric regressions and all of the good stuff. At that time, statisticians we're more of the opinion that rather than going model shopping, i.e. just throwing your data at every model that there is out there till you find a model that gives you the answer that you like, you need to do it the other way around. You need to formulate a hypothesis. You need to understand your data and then make the appropriate model choice. Now, obviously, very few people do that because it's much easier to go model shopping and just throw your data at any model that you can find until you get the answer you want. But from a more theoretical perspective, is that advice still valid? Should we go a little bit more stringent about do I have, I don't know, normal distribution? Do I even know what distribution I have, and so on and so forth? So what is your opinion on that?
Very nice and complicated question, because I don't think there is a really good, direct, straightforward answer. I guess that we are now living a situation where the new AI methods revealed their power in some specific context. For instance, I think there was a slide where the Alexa methods revealed that how was so good, the deep learning how was so good in the images context. And the LLM, like ChatGPT style, is so good in understanding tendencies and so. So it seems that now you don't have to care to the models, put inside data, and you will get the right answer. Of course, in my opinion, as a computer scientist, we cannot continue in this way. We have to be very careful to the context. For instance, the genomics is not exactly like, again, images or words. We have to pay attention to which the model works and don't work. It's my opinion. Sorry if I not completely answered to your question.
I was raised in the same tradition as you were. And I also tried to, pre-register my machine learning studies, which is right now kind of hard because techniques go so fast that at the moment you have a pre-registration of this is what I'm going to use, and by the time you have your data, it's already outdated. So I think one important distinction to make, though, is what you are basing your final choice of a method on. In statistics, if people are not doing it the right way, they go model shopping, they might pick the model that gives them the best outcome or the best significant level for their variable of interest. While with these machine learning models, generally you look at things like model fit. So you don't look at the outcome. You don't look at what gives you the best results, as in which variable comes out, but you look at what model fits your data best. And as long as people are sort of objectively, best thing would then to beforehand say, I'm going to test these type of models and I will pick the one with the best fit regardless of the outcome. And then I don't see there's a big problem with that. And yeah, perhaps in a couple of years when we know which models use for which data and we don't have to test several ones. But right now I see a lot of the papers that are coming out, it's sort of the research question might just be which model do we have to use more than what predictors are best to include.
May I just to add some, also there are the story that sometimes the results are based on the data set you have. From your question, I understand that it was typical to, okay, let's see how the models behaves with the normal distribution or some other kind of distribution. Now we are having the concrete real data sets and we tested. Sometimes in our case, we got things like that. A method could be okay with the data set, but not be okay if we change dramatically our data sets. So we could also have this kind of situation, and it's not so easy how to manage that.
you very much, Adriano. Okay, so next speaker is already waiting online. Chuck, can you hear us? Can you come online, unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you
Yep.
very
Okay,
well.
great. And can you see me okay?
Okay, I think that the IT stuff is working. Yes, perfect. Hello, Jack.
Great. Good
Yes.
morning. Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning. Yes.
Buongiorno. Let me share my screen and I
Yes.
can go ahead and get started. But I wanted to give Eric a chance. He's in the room, also from FDA, if he wanted to say any words to start.
Of course. Do you have a microphone there?
Just thank you very much for waking up so early and presenting. That's really all I have to say. I think we're all looking forward to hearing about what FDA is doing in this space.
Great. Thank you, Eric. All right. Can I confirm that you can all see my slides?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
All right. I'll go to the beginning here. Okay, thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Chuck Hassenplug. I'm a senior policy analyst at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. I am currently in the Office of Surveillance Strategy and Risk Prioritization. FDA has just gone through a pretty large reorg, not recall, the largest in our history, actually. And so we've moved some offices around and changed some acronyms, but more or less, we're still doing what we hope is a good job at protecting the food supply, and also we regulate medical devices, drugs, biologics, etc. So I'm happy to be with you all and appreciate the opportunity very much. So I'll be talking today about how we in FDA in the food program are using machine learning to really focus on a very practical problem for us, which is identifying which import samples to sample coming into the country. And I'll walk through that and how we're doing that. And I appreciate all kinds of questions and follow up afterward and potential collaboration. So this is our haystack. This is our modern day haystack, which is, ports of entry across the United States. We have, thousands and millions of food shipments coming into the country every year. And, in a typical day, we have a couple of humans out there in these ports of entry, and we have to ask them, to choose the right 5, 6, 7 containers to look at and examine physically or collect a sample and send it to the lab for a variety of different hazards, which I think some of you have been talking about today. So this is our real world challenge. I know many of your countries have the same challenge, and I think there's a great opportunity here to collaborate and share intelligence with each other, but also to apply AI and machine learning to help support these very consequential decisions. And we're experiencing a 10% rise in food imports every year, and seafood is a good example where the majority of the seafood that Americans consume is coming from abroad, but also other high-risk commodities like fruit and vegetables are also significantly coming from abroad. And so we're really being faced with how do we focus our limited resources and sample the correct things at the correct time. So enter machine learning and predictive analytics. This was something that our management challenged us a couple of years ago, Frank Yanis, under the new era of food, smarter food safety. And so we've really been trying to catch up with all of the data that we have to make better use of it. And I know you're all in the same boat. And we've talked about blockchain, which is also part of this, but also looking at the human side of things, food safety, culture, et cetera. So this is one area of our new era that we're exploring with predictive analytics. Several people have mentioned deep learning. What we have applied here is not deep learning. We're also concerned about really the transparency of the model and being able to justify and understand, explain the model's predictions and how we can act upon those. So we have shied away from going straight into deep learning, although we have found that deep learning models do have better performance. And we're really sticking with the classic machine learning approach here. It's something that we can explain better and better understand. I just came from a scientific conference yesterday, a lot of talk about quantum computing. There's a lot of exciting things happening out there. And I hope that, as was previously mentioned, as this field advances very quickly, we can keep pace with it as much as possible. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize that we're a public health mission. We have to be very fair with how we're applying our regulations, and we have to be able to explain them and ensure that they're based on risk and data and not an output of a model that we can't interpret. So we have several modeling objectives when we apply this, and I think there was a nice comment around you need to have your objectives in mind and your hypothesis before you start going to model shopping, and that's exactly what we have done here. And so, really we're trying to predict the probability of a certain sample being violative for a certain hazard. And we'll get down to the specificity and sensitivity of our models in a bit, but that's really where we are here, is a very actionable, at the point of decision, should we sample this product or not, have that machine learning model help, inform and complement the human intelligence and the guidance that we have, in our regulations. So like a classic machine learning algorithm, and this is a boosted tree model, it's going to give you two pieces of information. It's going to give you a probability between 0 and 100% of that product and that supply chain being violative for that hazard. And it's also going to tell us whether it's above a threshold that we're using right now to optimize the balance between sensitivity and specificity. There's always a trade-off between those two things. It's true in classic statistics and so too with machine learning and AI. And so we're using a certain threshold to optimize that. We can change that threshold to make our model more sensitive or more specific depending on the use case, and we have tuned it in that way depending on the resources we have available at the port of entry. These are our models. We decided early on to be more specific with how we're applying machine learning. Instead of having machine learning look at any possible violation in a model, that's not very actionable. That doesn't tell the regulatory CSO, the consumer safety officer, which lab to send it to and which analysis to do. So we wanted to be very specific here. So we developed a separate microbiological model, decomposition in seafood, unapproved antibiotics. We most recently have developed and deployed a pesticides model. We also have a toxic elements, heavy metals model. And then finally, we're also dipping our toe into applying machine learning to predict a violative inspection. FDA does more inspections than most countries do, and that's true on the domestic side and on the foreign side. And so, it's a lot of resource allocation there. And so, trying to understand, what might result in a violative inspection, and that's a complex process, much more complex than a lab sample. Is something that we've been exploring as well. And so when you get a prediction here, it's going to tell you this supply chain from this foreign supplier for this hazard and this product is more likely to be violative, and please consider sampling accordingly. So it's that very actionable, specific guidance that we're hoping to get here. So I think this is a pretty technical group, so I'll spend some time here. We typically have hovered around using 10 years of data. FDA collects a lot of samples, especially on the import side, and we're feeding those into the model. I think we vary between 10 and 15 years of data. Sometimes you can get better results if you use less data, but more recent data. Sometimes you can get better results if you use more data. So it's definitely something that we've been playing with, but this is, when we first started, this was the sweet spot for us. In addition to intelligence around and training on past samples, which are all FDA samples, by the way, we also bring in what we know about the supply chain in terms of, has it had violative inspection in the past? Has there been any other outbreaks or recalls associated with that supply chain? but we also importantly bring in demographic information, and we found this has been very useful for us. This is things that we have collected ourselves and know about through registration and past oversight work, but we're also leveraging some external data that we're getting from Dun & Bradstreet, which is a very large and old company that has been profiling businesses for a long time. A really important characteristic, for example, is the number of years that a foreign supplier, for example, has been in business. You know, think about a firm, many of them exist in Italy, that have been operating for hundreds of years versus a firm that just started last month. We feed that into the model, and we have found that that is a significant predictor of compliance. We've also explored various different models. We have settled on LightGBM, which is a boosted tree model that is made by Microsoft. This model does a great job at hot encoding categorical variables, of which we have a lot of, and so it's really, you know, been a benefit to us in terms of efficiency. We also found that this type of model and this algorithm in particular has been consistently had good performance across many of our models. And so it's allowed us to build a model with this algorithm for one hazard and then quickly apply that same code and to our next model. And so we've been able to iterate and build out many different models over a short period of time. Finally, we extensively evaluate the features and the predictive features of our model. They vary by the different hazards and commodity pairs, but you know, I'm giving some examples here. We're also using SHAP values to really understand not only the magnitude of the prediction of each feature, but the directionality. We think that's very important. If you're not all doing this in your models, I would highly recommend it. It's been very informative for us. For example, I mentioned, you know, the time since the firm has been known to FDA, or the time it's been in operation. You know, knowing the directionality of that, knowing that a newer firm is more likely to be violative than an older firm, you know, helps us, you know, better target even if we didn't use the model. So it's been a very enriching, you know, exercise for us to you know, explore what the output of the model is. Even if we don't actively use those results, which we are actually using. This is my favorite slide and one I wanted to spend a little bit of time with. You know, as a business analyst before I was a data scientist, this is where I really kind of take over from the modeling team. They run the model, we talk about it, we look at the performance, we see that it's statistically significant, and look at that confusion matrix and all of those F1 scores. And then we start to explore, you know, what is the output of the model actually telling us. And in this way, you know, I'm sharing here, and it may be small in your screen, the different industry codes. This is our product groupings that are applied in FDA, our proprietary system. And the first column is, you know, how many different active supply chains they are. A supply chain for us is a very detailed product code grouping along with the foreign supplier that is bringing that product in. So think about, you know, how many, you know, there might be a Nestle, which is bringing in 10 or 12 different products. So that would be represent, you know, 12 different supply chains. And so if you add that all up, we're getting, you know, every year about 600,000 different combinations of products. Some are very large, some are very small, but this is the volume and the diversity that we're experiencing here. The second column of data here in red is the number of supply chains that are predicted by our model above threshold, and this is specific for micro. And then I've calculated in the third column here the percentage. And so you can see here, and to help normalize and compare these, you know, dietary supplements, cheese, soup, spices, seafood is up there. They have a higher percentage of supply chains that are flagged by our model for micro, and they also in the last column have a higher average probability across those different supply chains. So this is kind of confirming areas of high risk that we've already known about, inherently high risk for micro, but it's also helping us at the same time to focus in. Out of the 600,000 supply chains that we have at our disposal to sample, only 12% of them are being flagged by the model. So that drastically reduces the haystack that we need to explore to find those needles. And that's been a real game changer for us. And I'll specifically orientate you towards the bottom here, fruits and vegetables, as I mentioned, high commodity, high volume commodities coming into the United States for imports. We're still experiencing lots of recalls and outbreaks related to this in the microbiological space, but only 7 and 5% of these supply chains are flagged. So when we sample these products at the border, typically we don't find many things, and this is now a validation of why they come in. They're present, but they're not present in the vast majority of the supply chains. So we're hoping that, and I'm going to share later that this is the case, that by focusing in on where the machine learning model is telling us where to go, we can catch some more things than we would have normally and prevent some outbreaks and recalls. We can look at the output of the data and aggregate it up to the country level. And here I'm sharing a scatter plot where we're having on the x-axis the percent of supply chains that are above threshold, and then the average probability on the y-axis to give you a little bit of sense of how do these different countries, and this is specific for seafood, how do they look with respect to their entire industry, and are we seeing systemic issues across the industry, or is it maybe only certain specific supply chains? This is a tool that we can use at this aggregated level to maybe inform outreach and training with specific countries. We have offices around the world, including in India, which has a large volume of seafood being exported to the United States. And so this is an opportunity for us to sit down with competent authorities in the industry and talk about, hey, we're seeing some systemic issues across these types of products or in these regions of your country. Maybe this is an area where some training and outreach could be helpful. We're very much in the business of not catching violations at the border. We actually want to put this model out of business. We want to prevent problems from occurring and facilitate trade and ensure that safe and healthy food, which our center director is saying is a vehicle for wellness. We want to make sure that reaches consumers. And so how can we work together is really where we're focusing our efforts. So I think it's been discussed before, and I'll go through it in a little bit more detail. We're very, very methodical about how we evaluate our models. This is a new area of exploration for us. As I said, these are very consequential decisions. We are, holding up trade so that we can, send a sample to the lab. That could have, economic consequences for the foreign supplier. Think about, fresh berries, which have a short shelf life. We really want to make sure that we're doing a good job and selecting the right things. And so, evaluating our models is very important. We do that in silico. So after, the 80-20 classic split, when we're looking at, training and testing, we do a stepwise method where we make sure that if we change one part of our model, we only change one part, and then we rerun it and assess our results. And if it's looking like the model is improved, then we keep that change and move on. We then, once we're convinced ourselves that it's looking performant in silico, we move to retrospective, where we generate and apply the model to all active foreign supply chains, and then just put that in our back pocket and observe natural sampling activities done by FDA in the field, and then go back and look using a confusion matrix. How often was the model right or wrong? False positives, false negatives, explore that deeply and determine statistical significance there if it's better than baseline. And then finally, once we have passed that stage gate, we move into prospective mode, where we actually deploy our model and share the model predictions with our field staff in our IT systems through what you might know about is called Predict. And that will help inform a decision at the point of entry. And we make sure that humans are always in the loop. that models alone are not dictating sample decisions. They're only giving advice and guidance. It's also always the final decision by the human based on their intelligence, their expertise, and other competing priorities in the food program, whether to go ahead and sample. Together, those lead to having more and more confidence that this is a useful tool in our regulatory toolkit. So our model results in the wild, roughly we see that our accuracy is in the area between 70 and 92%. It varies depending on the season. We refresh our models quarterly, so it depends on the season and the specific hazard and commodity pairs. It also depends on how many samples have been taken in that quarter. A positive predictive value, as someone has asked about, that's the precision piece, is 2 to 5 times greater, 200 to 500% better than baseline. So we are absolutely finding more violations by using this model. And we rigorously, as I mentioned, test statistically significance and have found it to be significant at the 95% confidence interval, and sometimes at the 99%. That's on the retrospective side. Prospective side, sometimes things fall down when you actually deploy things in the wild. We have actually found that our model performance holds with these metrics in the wild in a prospective way, and sometimes the performance even improves. And we're thinking that has to do with the combination of the model prediction and the human knowledge. When the model says yes and the human says yes, maybe that's more, there's something there and it's more likely to be violative. And so we're very encouraged by that. And we often try to, have user feedback from the humans, try to understand what thought process they're going through, and try to code those as features into the model moving forward. And then finally, this is my big point that I'd like to have resonate with you all, is in Q4 of FY24 alone. So this is July through October or September of this past year. We've had 184 violative samples that have been sampled primarily based on the model recommendation. So probably these would not have been sampled because of the tens of thousands of other opportunities out there. And summing these up, that's 47 million kilograms of food with a declared value of 9 million. And if you think that you consume about 500 grams, half a kilogram serving size, and assuming a 10% illness rate, we can definitely change all of these. But just assuming that that's 9.4 million people that did not get harmed because of our machine learning implementation in one quarter alone. So we're really seeing a benefit here, and we're hoping that we can continue to work with others to improve what we're doing. I think it's important to share with you all as you're exploring this, and you have maybe similar lessons learned, what we have gained from going through this, which has been about a 5-year journey for us. Data quality is essential. We often talk about bias, and bad data in is bad output out, and that's very important. And we're blessed with having a lot of very structured, well-validated data, but still, if the importers and the brokers misrepresent themselves when they register or when the product comes in, in the import manifest, that's what the model is running on. And so that's definitely, something that we want to be, taking of. We do a careful job of imputing missing values, removing outliers, dropping fields that have too many null values, those kinds of things to try to help improve data quality. As I mentioned, shrinking the haystack. With only 12 to 17, actually 17% across all of our different models predicted by our model, it really helps us to focus our efforts, and that will then result in us not looking at certain products that are less likely to be violative or not violative, and that's going to be a win-win for facilitating trade. There's a tension and a paradigm in FDA and probably in other regulatory agencies around surveillance versus compliance. And we often think that one is not one is at the expense of the other, but 35% of our predicted supply chains have never ever been sampled. So it's not that the model is only looking at past violations and predicting a future violation. It's actually inferring, and that's the power of it, some patterns and helping us identify where we might be able to do both surveillance and kind of follow up on compliance concerns and compliance signals at the same time. So this has been another win-win for us. And then I mentioned already, but I'll reiterate it. We really want to move away from being reactive to more of a proactive stance. Finding problems in the marketplace before they manifest themselves in human illness, but even before that, working with industry and other governments to identify why our model is saying what it is and trying to help improve compliance at the point of manufacture, not at the point where we're testing it in the lab. I realize maybe my time is getting short, so I'll wrap up here with a very collaborative message. We're very interested in, and we appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing and learn about what you're all doing. We would welcome opportunities to go in deeper depth and collaborate further. We're exploring other areas of feature predictions here, adding food safety culture, weather data. I liked very much the focus on whole genome sequencing. We have a lot of activity there, so we should talk about that. How could we aggregate these results and share them with the scientific community, with industry, with other competent authorities, regulators? How would that be helpful? We're actually in conversation right now with Canada, and I'm hoping today leads us to more collaborations with our European partners to do just this. And then, finally, how do we collaborate with others to maybe share and exchange data and maybe develop some joint models? Think about a world where the EU is importing, food from a third country, which is also providing that same food to the United States. Well, perhaps joining forces would be very helpful and help us focus. Perhaps a model which is combining FDA and other countries' sampling data to make it even more powerful. These are very exciting areas that we would love to explore with you all. And with that, I'm happy to take questions and go into further detail if needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck. That I have quick questions from the online chat. That the very quick one is that those models that you have used for the prioritization of the inspection, are they available or are you willing to share? So that's the first question.
So I think it depends very much. There's a lot of very sensitive data here. I'll give one example. The relationship between the foreign supplier and the importer domestically. That's a business relationship. There's also volume information in terms of how frequency do these supply chains ship, how much quantity in terms of kilograms, how much value. So there is some sensitive data in here. And so I think we would be more willing to talk about our approach, as I've done here, and about the specific features that might be of interest or similar to what others may have. But I think we would have to probably think about MOUs and some other things around sharing the actual model and the data that feeds it. But we are in the process of uploading this to our own internal GitHub and talking through that. And I think we would welcome those inquiries. Yes.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yes.
So we have a question from the floor. So Marcus, do you want?
Thank you. Thanks, Jack. Marcus Lipp, FAO. Quick question for you, and maybe I'm thinking too far outside the box, or a little bit too wide. The model that you presented has some really impressive success stories behind it. So it really makes a difference and leaves a mark, if you want, in the right way of things. What I'm wondering is, how much do you expect that the markets will react to then either move to some more creative shippings or trans-shipping and other things to disguise country of origin, to move value-added procedures up the chain, that then country of origin declaration again will be slightly different. Do you expect that to be to become a problem, that people try to be a little bit more creative and change it, because that's a key criteria, right? Is this geographic origin or a company name or whatever else it is. So how do you think markets will react to try to avoid that? Thanks.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. There's a positive way to interpret that question and maybe a more cynical way. And so I'll take both. On one hand, like I mentioned, being proactive and working with industry and partnering and engaging with them, I think is very important. So if we shared, and actually I recently presented this at a conference internally in the United States, and industry was present. And when I shared this point around, what if the Nestle's of the world, we were able to sit down and share with them, hey, these are your facilities that we have more concern with, or these are the products that the model is indicating, what would you do about that? And, I heard from an industry representative, they weren't with Nestle, I just use that as an example, that they would be very interested. Think about where you have a very important supply chain that is maybe you have a sole source, and FDA's model is a bit concerned with it. You would want to know that and maybe go to that supplier and hey, are you sure that you're not putting pesticides on the product, or that you're controlling your microhazards or what have you, and prevent those problems? So I think there could be a lot of benefit, and that could move markets for sure. In a good way. And I think, just making sure that all aspects of the supply chain, we're in the business of really protecting public health. And I think, partnering would be a great way. But the skeptical, or cynical way to take it is, could industry, if we shared too much, try to get around this? Could they, ship through a third country that might not, be historically what the model is doing? But I would say that that's been a concern of ours for a long time. We have a predict system that has been using, non-AI machine learning ways to identify risk in the supply chain, and we've always been worried about port shopping. And the point there is, we also have rules around anomalies. If all of a sudden you are shipping in this manner, I'll give the enoki mushroom example. You were bringing enoki mushrooms into the United States, and we found problems. We put that on import alert, and all of a sudden you're starting to bring in different types of mushrooms from the same country, or you're bringing in different mushrooms from a third country. All of a sudden, this third country is bringing in a lot more where it wasn't before. Those are signals that the model can pick up on, those anomalies. And so I think that, it will always be a concern. But I think we would rather take a positive approach and say, okay, how do we control the hazards in enokis and make sure that they can get on people's plates if they want to consume them, as opposed to just trying to play whack-a-mole.
Thank you, Chuck. I have a question or comment from the floor.
Yeah. Great.
This is Eric, FDA. Thanks for this. So I have a quick question, because I'm sure, with the successes of that, it's quite, you almost go like, wow, this could be really useful. So, I'm sure other people maybe really want to know, A, what's the budget for this? How much did this cost us to develop? And then kind of on the flip side of that, does this help, or could potentially help, speed up trade or processing at the border, so there could actually be benefits, for importing?
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate those questions. Those are important ones that I didn't, fully touch on. So the budget for this, I am a really big believer. I'm going to reveal, my personal preferences, but I'm a really big believer that this kind of work at a regulatory agency is inherently governmental. We need to understand our own data, and we need to understand and own the analysis of it and the models that we're using to do that. And not only from an ethical and sustainable standpoint, but also from a practical standpoint, as was mentioned earlier, the technology is moving very quickly here, and these models get stale after, a couple of months, and they get less performant. Also, the world has changed. Supply chains are changing constantly. So you need to refresh these models and come up with new metrics and Maybe industry is trying to get around the model or have changed their practices. And so you really do need to be dynamic and iterative here. And I think that just doesn't lend itself as much to a contractor dependent model. Although the stuff is technical, more and more data scientists are coming into the marketplace, and I think it's becoming more accepted, and the tools are getting better. So we are actually very much low budget here. We're very much about open source tools, Python and open source packages, and hiring data scientists to have access to our own data and running our own models and turning the crank. Probably the biggest expense, and this is one that was already, an expense at FDA, was how to deploy, the predictions into our import system. We've already had that system. We're leveraging our existing system Predict, so we're already paying for that. And so actually the implementation of this has been more in terms of time and subject matter expertise and rigorous, evaluation, as opposed to contractors and massive IT budgets, that might not be sustainable for many, smaller operations. The other point around facilitating trade, this is absolutely our hope. By every time we sample something that we've already sampled before that's not violative, we're not really gaining any new intelligence, and we're not informing the model, and we're not benefiting public health or trade, right? We're holding that line just because maybe it's a high risk product, but if we've already been there, maybe there's better opportunities out there. And so we're hoping that instead of a kind of a shotgun approach of just trying to hopefully find things, we're being much more intentional and focused with this work. And again, machine learning is not magic. It's not the end all be all. I know some of these numbers are impressive, but it's only because of the strong base of regulatory oversight and expertise that we have that I think we've been able to do this in such a successful way so quickly. But our hope is absolutely, Eric and others, that we will facilitate trade, and I think we've already been seeing that in our import data.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chuck, for joining today with this seminar, and then also thank you for great presentation. And the same goes to everybody here. But then with this opportunity, could we have some take-home message, maybe 1 to 2 messages from each panel member, and then can I start from you, Adriana?
Thanks, Masami. My home message is more or less what we already just said in our presentation. Data quality, absolutely the main and important point. But in the presentation, there are many right sentence to how to deal with the data that could be useful for AI. Absolutely good recommendations. And then try to use what is publicly available. It is a great resource to start AI implementation, also where you have no data from your side. That's my point.
Thank you very much, Flor.
Yeah, I guess my biggest message would be to invest in AI and data management literacy in order to make informed decisions on when and how to use AI.
Thank you. And Eric?
Yeah, maybe 2 points. I noticed that there's a wealth of knowledge around machine learning in food safety, and I would say AI using structured data. The field of generative AI is maybe still fairly open for food safety, and I think that's something to explore more. Then another last point is I picked up on what Chuck was saying about collaborative work on joint models. And I would like to understand better whether a community like AgML, which is agriculture machine learning, could be a place or a similar place to work together for AI for food safety, because in my mind that would then we could really move away from closed innovation models like what you do in your institutes to an open innovation model for AI for food safety. Over.
Thank you, Eric. I'm asking two experts online that, Jesus, are you still online? Can you speak to give us some take-home message from your side?
Hi. Well, nothing that has not been said by the others. I'm afraid I would say three messages: data quality, and data quality. I think without it, we cannot do anything.
Thank you very much, Jesus. And Chuck, can you give us your overall take-home message from your side?
Sure. First of all, I wasn't able to catch everybody's talk, so I'm sorry for that, and I would love to follow up with folks. It was a little early for me here in the United States, but I so appreciate the opportunity. I think what resonates with me is that it's very exciting to see other institutes and foreign countries and even industry start to apply AI to food safety, and it's so much more gratifying to talk about it applied to a specific topic like AI or like food safety than it is just kind of in general. And I agree with the comment around generative AI. We actually have a tool, and maybe we can connect you with that. Eric can talk to you. We are applying generative AI to that space and natural language processing. But I think broadly, what I am very excited about is that we can learn from each other, and I would very much love to approach that open model. And at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all consume food, and it benefits the receiving country as well as the producing country to find ways to produce that food in a more safe way. And I think with global warming and all of the things that are going on, it's even more important that we don't waste food. We don't throw it out in a recall. If we could have prevented that from being contaminated by some dangerous pathogen or chemical, then I think that's also a public health benefit to humanity. So really love to keep talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. And if I may, from my side, I learned that this responsible use of AI is something that we have to keep in mind. And then for that, we do need to have some sort of a preparation before going ahead from the competent authority side, that to think about it first, as Flor said, that education is probably very important in terms of having the literacy in the use of AI. And then in terms of the data, that in food safety area, it has been quite important for many, many decades. And then I think that this is not, we cannot stress enough about having a good data, but then at the same time, hopefully that this use of AI will prompt people to think about once again and re-emphasize the importance of having a good quality data set. So that would be my learning today. And then with that, can I give the floor to Marcus to give us the overall take-home messages?
Thank you. First of all, thanks to Masami and her team to set up this event today and to find the great speakers that we had, and thanks to all the speakers, of course. It was really very, very interesting. Now, the problem with closing remarks is, of course, that as we pick the right speakers, much of it has already been said. So there's limits to what can be additionally be said that has not been expressed in very eloquent and profound manners. It is the one part of it is this already a complicated field, and it will develop fast. It is developing faster than we believe, and most of us at least, and it will probably accelerate. Very challenging on its own, so we can meet in half a year or maybe in 3 months again, and we'll have new discussions about new models and new capabilities. What that means to me is, and it has been expressed by others, of course, that we need to continue to communicate. We need to find a way to collaborate. We need to find a way to join activities. across countries, across institutions, because this is all a little bit bigger than us, right? And bigger than each of us. And so I hope we find, and I hope this event here is part of the impetus to find that courage to collaborate more intensely, better. And in case of doubt, you probably all noticed that if you didn't already invest in AI, you found a new hobby, because it will be there for all of us, and it will be important in our private lives, but most certainly in our professional lives. And we have to just work all together on AI literacy for ourselves. So with that, thank you so much.
As informed at the beginning that the recording will be available, and then I will send a link to all the registered participants, so please look forward to it. And then as Flor explained, this FAO publication on the AI for food safety will be available in the first quarter of 2025. And then we plan to summarize today's discussions and then also the case studies in the publication. So I hope that it will be quite resourceful for many people who are present online as well as in person. So thank you very much, everybody, and then have a wonderful day or evening. Thank you.